Well, welcome, friends, to the Healthy Christian Leader. I'm Dwight Habermel, and I have our guest today, Father James Mallon, and it is great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
It's great to be back. I think we've done this before, haven't we?
We have. Yeah. We have a number of times.
And it was this topic?
Yes, the same.
I'm still not very healthy. I don't know what's going on.
But you've learned a lot of lessons over the journey.
Well, yeah, it's fail quickly and learn from your mistakes. It's a good principle.
Well, you know, one of the things that I've loved and appreciated about you, both as a friend and also as, one who's been involved in various ministry leadership events together, is that you share transparently about the challenges and the battles of growing and learning and leading and moving forward, and that gives other people courage and room to grow, because the reality is, all of us are in the place of moving towards wholeness and Christ's transformation and balance in our lives. And I love the passion that you have for Christ. You are a blessing and an inspiration.
Well, thanks, man.
So that's why you're here. So we're going to talk about facing feedback and criticism as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It doesn't come that often, does it?
I never really had much experience with that.
You have actually led not only renewal in your local church, parish, but a number of churches, and have gone on to lead a whole movement of parish renewal, moving from maintenance to mission, mobilizing to the harvest, which is totally amazing. But that hasn't been without opposition, has it?
No, not at all. It's the nature of the game. It's the nature of the field in which we find ourselves. And I use the word field intentionally because Jesus says the kingdom of God is like a sower who goes into his field. He sows good seed. Mm-hmm. While he sleeps, the enemy sows the bad seed in the same field. Jesus is quite clear that there is an enemy of the kingdom who actively sows seed, not in some other field, but in the same field. So what does that tell us? That when we talk about pastoral conversion, we use that term in the Catholic world, pastoral conversion, pastoral transformation, it simply means renewing a church. Churches can become sickly, they can become inward focused, self-referential, and the conversion is that it means to turn, turning a church outward, so it focuses on evangelism and reaching out and serving the poor and building up the kingdom. That never happens by itself. It has to be led through the power of the Holy Spirit, and that conversion process, it's not only sociological and psychological and theological and all the other odicals that you can put in there. It's also spiritual. There's a spiritual battle at the heart of it. It's entirely spiritual. And most churches, I think, like if a church is floundering and not engaging its mission and just creating kind of selfish consumer Christians, the enemy, to put it on in the ops room of the enemy, mm-hmm. You're not on the board,
right?
But if leadership of a church
you're probably part of the problem.
Well, you're on the enemy doesn't have to worry about you.
Yeah.
Like you're not on the enemy's board. You're not on his list of concerns. But if the leadership of a church says, we're gonna seek to live out the mission in obedience to Jesus. We're going to seek to live out this mission. Guess what? The enemy is now interested in you, and this is a spiritual battle. And the tools of the enemy are the same as they've always been. He lies, he deceives, he causes confusion. And so this is very much at the heart of this matter, this question that you're raising. And the question is, well, how do we discern? How do we know what's of the enemy, what's of human, what's of the flesh, what is actually valid and true and insightful? And so I think the starting point is recognizing that we're on a spiritual plane. So if you're going to seek to be a kind of purpose-driven church, you've got to start with the spiritual. And that, I think that means laying down ground cover, having intercessors, people. You're recruiting the prayer warriors in your church to intercede and to pray for spiritual coverage, because that's the first thing that's going to happen.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, because so often, as church leaders, we can begin to think it's the next idea or a program and not bring into account the reality of spiritual battle, even though that Paul makes it so very clear in the scripture. And but we wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? And when we start engaging,
I was thinking through, actually, I preached on this morning, and for those of you who aren't Catholic, we have a daily lectionary, which in the Catholic Church for Mass, the readings are preset. And you generally will move through different books of the Bible. For the last week and a half, we've been going through Ephesians. Mm-hmm. And the first reading this morning was Ephesians 4, where Paul says, make every effort to maintain this unity, the unity of the Spirit, make every effort. And he gives this theological foundation of, well, why is it that we should do that? Because there's one Lord, one faith, one hope, one baptism, one God and Father of all. He gives like 7 ones. Mm-hmm. Here's the theological reason. Now make every effort to do this. And then towards the end of chapter 4, he talks about not grieving the Holy Spirit and watching our language and how we speak about one another. So very, very human. And then he moves into explicitly talking about spiritual warfare, to put on the armor of God and such. So it's laid out there that we have to be protective of unity in the church. And here's the thing: it's like there are human reasons, but the human reasons and spiritual reasons for disunity, because any organization, if you take a neutral stance, it will fragment. It's human. It's very, very human. I mean, in human relationships, we bump up against each other. There's friction. There even with friends and family members, we can hurt one another. We misunderstand. We mishear. Yes. We judge one another. We create false narratives because of our insecurities. Like, it's a treacherous ground. Mm-hmm. And just for the flesh, what St. Paul refers to as our broken human nature. Never mind when, Mr. Slimy, that's what I like to call him, when he gets involved, because, the term diabolos is 2 Greek words, dia and bolos, from bolein, which means to throw. So the diabolos is the one who throws through. He causes chaos, he causes confusion. So make every effort to maintain the spirit of unity and the bond of peace. Make every effort. And that includes when you're leading a church through a time of transformation. And it's difficult because, as we might explore in a little bit, it's sometimes the source of conflict is the fact that you've started to take the church in a particular direction, and there might be people who want to get off that bus. Mm-hmm.
Well, and so, you're in an environment, you're leading a church forward into mission and purpose. You have a spiritual enemy that in reality is affecting people's thinking and mind. How can we as leaders, we have to be able to listen to people and to try and hear and understand. It's such an important piece. How do you sort out what is constructive feedback and what is
it's a great question.
Criticism?
It's a great question, Dwight. I think the starting point before anything is number one, to expect the criticism and to welcome the criticism. Mm-hmm. I once heard a church leader say this in our church. He said, dissent is not just tolerated, it's encouraged. Now, what they meant by dissent was not doctrinal dissent. It wasn't dissent from the vision, perhaps, but in terms of maybe things like what's the best way to accomplish our mission? Mm-hmm. But we can circle back onto this. So we should expect and encourage it, because here's the other thing too: as leaders, all of us have blind spots. None of us have 360 vision. We live under this fallacious idea that formation is somehow to produce a well-rounded person. I don't think there's any such thing as a well-rounded person. I'm certainly not well-rounded, and I've never met anyone who is. I think we're all kind of warped. I think, or we're beautifully and wonderfully made. we're all unique with unique strengths and unique weaknesses. I don't think there is a well-rounded person. I think there can be well-rounded teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so the starting point is that we have blind spots. Like if you're driving in a car, you can have your side mirrors and a rear view mirror, and even with those, you still have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
You can still get into a collision, and so we're blind, and that's a starting principle. Is that our life is a journey of having our eyes opened. Think of the story of Jesus healing the blind man whose eyes were opened gradually, and like as we grow as leaders, as we grow as disciples. But in my own journey, that's been painful, because at times when I'm looking back, I was just a total idiot. Not because I didn't even really know I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't see it. And if it wasn't for other people in my life to tell me, to speak the truth in love, to speak to me in love about the impact I was having, I would never perhaps have grappled with that part of my personality and learned to grow. So we need people around us who are going to help us and speak truth to us. And that's why I really believe that leadership is best done out of a team. So that would be a starting point. Don't try to, if you're going to try to lead something, and put it this way, leadership, there's a great definition of leadership that I thought was attributed to a particular pastor, but it turns out it goes back to two professors at Harvard. I forget their names, but they said leadership is the art of disappointing your people at a rate they can accept.
That's really good.
It's like parenting, right?
Yeah.
Parenting is the same thing. I mean, if you've never disappointed your kids, you're probably not a good parent, you know. Mm-hmm. But it's at the rate they can accept. You know, that takes wisdom, and so that kind of leadership is best done with a small team of people around you who complement you and make up for your blind spots. Now, you did ask a question about say you have that in place. You expect criticism. You're open to criticism, because here in every critique there is truth. Even if it's an exaggeration, even if what someone says is a caricature or even an extreme caricature, there's an element of truth, and we can always be thankful for that. So say you've got that in place, you've got a team in place. The question though is how do we discern feedback? Because one of our starting beliefs is that the Spirit of God is not just on a few people. Mm-hmm. It's been poured out on all people. There may be particular charisms of leadership, but you know, I think of the story of Eldad and Medad from the book of Numbers. You know, Moses says, "Would that all the people of God prophesied and were filled with the Spirit." Well, that gift of prophecy might be quite inconvenient. Prophecy is usually inconvenient to leaders, and so in principle, we've got to be open to it. So, get to your question: how do we discern it? I came across years ago an article written, or a chapter maybe in one of Carey Nieuwhof's books, mm-hmm. and I used it with permission in a book that I wrote for Catholic pastors, and created a flow chart with it, and kind of made a few little tiny adaptations. But it's Carey Nieuwhof's work, so I want to give credit there. He's fantastic, by the way. Like anything that Carey does is great. The first point was, is it anonymous or not? And for years, I remember my first years at St. Benedict Parish in Clayton Park here, I received so much anonymous stuff. And some of it was pretty cruel. It was pretty nasty stuff. And I don't know if there was this masochistic part of me, but I'd read the anonymous stuff, and and I'd keep it, I'd file it. Like I'd get letters that would be complimentary, tell me what a great guy I am, what a great job I'm doing. I'd read them and say, oh, that's wonderful, throw it in the garbage. But all the negative stuff, the anonymous stuff, I would keep it in a file. I don't know if it was like, I got to try to keep myself humble or something, but it was like I got the most bizarre stuff, and it would, of course, it disturbs you because it's like getting sucker punched in a crowd of people.
Yeah.
And you don't know who to respond to. Like you've got people who make unfair criticisms and you get nowhere to direct it. And of course, the other thing about anonymous letters is they claim to represent 10,000 other people who think just like they do that you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so it can steal the heart out of you. It's very devious. And so after a while, I got to the point where I told my secretary, if there's no return address, if the sender doesn't identify him or herself, open it up. And if it's an anonymous letter, not only do I not want to receive it, I don't want you to even tell me that you received it. Just bin it. And I let people know, like I'm open to feedback, but if it's anonymous, I'm not gonna take it seriously. So number one, if it's anonymous, don't have a filter there for you so that you don't even know it's come in, and don't let your curiosity overtake you. Let it go.
Yeah.
So discard anonymous letters. Number two, is the person on board or not? Or are they just a consumer? Because here's the thing. Okay, so are they on board? And that means are they on board with the mission? Do they give? I mean, that sounds kind of maybe a bit. You say what? Yeah, I want to know.
But it shows they're really buying in.
Yeah, are they actually buying in? Are they serving in ministry? Mm-hmm. Are they growing as a disciple? Are they, are they engaged? Or are they just showing up? Mm-hmm. That's a secondary thing about how seriously do I have to take this? How much? Because if a person isn't bought in and they're critiquing something, some initiative, I'll read it. But yeah, thanks for letting me know that. I'll let the person know I got their letter. I'm not going to put much energy into it. Next level down. So say the person, it's not anonymous and they're bought in. Okay, so you've got someone who's bought in. That person's feedback now is worth considering. Now we're at a different level now. Mm-hmm. So the next question, and this goes to this was a real insight by Carrie, is what's driving the complaint? Is it theologically, scripturally driven, or is it a preference? See, I believe that the primary driving dynamic in most churches is consumerism. We live in a consumer culture. It's seeped into the church. We're all about our preferences. And is this complaint simply about you're violating my preferences? You changed the time of a service. You changed the type of music. You changed this, and I prefer this to this. That's what 90% of complaints are going to be about. I don't like that. Everyone has preferences, but if you're what we call, say, a missionary disciple, like you'll sacrifice your preferences for the sake of the mission. So again, if it's preference-based, thank the person, don't take it too seriously. Here's the thing. If they have a theological reason for flagging something, then again, now you've got the most serious kind of feedback that you need to bring to a place of discernment. That's the kind of stuff you need to bring to your leadership team, because it's not anonymous. This person is bought in. They've made a theological case. This is what we need to begin to discern. So we need to bring others into it, discuss it, pray about it, and see what the Spirit leads. You could discern and pray about this and decide, nope, we're going to stay the course, or we're going to adjust course, or we're going to actually change course completely because of this person's input, because the Spirit of God may be speaking here. And that goes also to any kind of concern that's raised. I think once you go through that filter, bring it to your leadership team and really take that seriously. And at the end, making that decision about whether to change course or not is going to be up to your team and up to where the Spirit leads you. But I think at that point you need to sit down even with that person and have a meeting with them, because this isn't just about someone upset because you changed the time of a service.
What about you've got somebody who's just come into your office or met you at the foyer, and they've got this barrage of issues, criticisms.
About
It might be about you and your leadership personally or the organization itself. What typically is the mental ladder that you go through so that you're not responding out of anger or
Yes.
frustration or a reaction? Because
So-
that's challenging to do.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, I think you have got to, if we're taking leadership seriously, and especially if you're in a larger church, you can't have a situation where everyone has access, number one. So when that's happened to me in the recent years since I've been at a bigger church, it's usually at the door of the church, or it's a letter or an email that gets sent. And I think as much as possible, you need to create distance between the first communication and when we respond, because my natural response is probably similar to many people's. It's to be a bit knee-jerk, to get upset, to get defensive. We're all kind of broken and busted up. We've all, been that person. You've written I'm gonna show her, and you write the response, and thanks be to God, before you hit the send button, it's like, maybe I better sleep on this. And it's always a bad choice to respond immediately. So give some time. And again, I read this. It was something that Kerry Newhoff, I've received so much from him. He talked about upping the communication. So if someone sends you an email, respond with a phone call. If someone gives you a phone call, complains on a phone call, speak to them in person. Go to the next level of communication, because it's ultimately about relationship, and try to hear
That's
them
very
out.
good.
And again, I would use a similar level, and try of discernment, and trying to really listen to what's underneath. Like what is the real concern? What is the value that they believe that you're not respecting? You might listen, you might hear it, and you might hear it quite plainly, and it may be a value because, and this is often the case in my experience, it's the person has a very different vision than what we're trying to bring about. So, and it might be helpful to be able to identify that a lot of conflict seem to be about what they're not really about, if you know what I mean. People will argue tactical issues, strategic issues, and you can argue and argue and argue, and after a while you realize, actually the disagreement is not on that at all. The disagreement is about vision. And that's why, conversely, and when we have healthy conflict, because I believe if you're really leading out of a team scenario, again, this is where disagreement is not only tolerated, it's welcomed, because you want differing perspectives. But that's under the umbrella of total agreement on the vision and mission. Vision and mission must be nailed down and
Clear.
And absolutely clear. And that gives you a protective canopy to have some great fights.
Yeah.
Great disagreements. And I tell you, the more disagreements, the better. I mean, guys like Patrick Lancioni will say it's the job of the leader to mind for conflict. You got mind for conflict. Because sometimes you might have people around the table who are a bit conflict averse, or they like to be, they're high harmony people, and you've got to really kind of try to pull it out of people.
We've got about 3 minutes left, and I want to carry this conversation on in our next conversation we have together, because it's such a good one and so relative. Where do you find positive, critical feedback when you're going to look for it? Like when you're, when you need some of that more intimate, critical feedback.
I think every leader needs to have people that are friends and love you and actually can speak truth to you. I think it was Maxwell who I heard him say once at a conference, I've only ever been but 5 minutes away from being an idiot. 5 minutes away from idiocy. He says something like that. is very true. You know, like we're on the precipice quite often, and especially leaders who are of fairly high intensity, we can get so focused on what we're doing that we lose perspective. And so we need that person that we know loves us and cares for us as a person. So we need truth speakers around us. Again, that's why, again, if you can lead out of a healthy team, if you got colleagues that are close to, I mean, one of the questions I try to always ask when I meet with my one-on-ones is, what am I not seeing? Like, what am I not seeing? Because you've got that, you always have that power imbalance, and leaders sometimes are blind to that. It's even worse if you got one of these around your neck. In church leadership, you're not just the boss, you're the spiritual leader. And if you're the ordained spiritual leader, there's a whole kind of thing that goes with that, that out of respect for the role, people sometimes are not free in speaking up. They confuse that with somehow being disrespectful, or they feel that somehow there'll be negative repercussions. So we as leaders have to make that a safe space. I mean, I really welcome it. Like, we don't want deferential people around us. We want respectful people, but we want committed people, committed to the mission. Because, like, if I'm walking around with my fly down, you better tell me.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean, if you're my friend, you're going to tell me that, okay? And we're, as we said it towards the beginning, the starting point in all of this is that we're all blind. We all have blind spots, and we need each other in leadership.
So very, very good. Father James Mallon, and we're going to carry this conversation on in our next podcast, so be sure to come on back to the Healthy Christian Leader, and we'll be carrying the conversation on with Father James Mallon. Well, today's conversation was fantastic, but we're not finished yet. We'll be back in the next video with the same guest with more discussion about leader health. You know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell. Would you join us for the next episode? You can find new episodes every week in video form on the Aaron Ministry YouTube page, and in audio form as the Healthy Christian Leader Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leaders. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more resources and information on how to donate or to start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.